In all times, Roman gladiators have been hallowed by romance. The fearless warriors who competed in the arena of the Colosseum and outside of it accepted death with a smile, were distinguished by their physical strength and sheer courage. Certainly, not everyone was prepared to take the gladiator's vows, which stated, among many other things, that a gladiator must honorably accept his own death, whether it be by weapon, by burning, or by being hacked to death. To a large degree, however, some of the stereotypes that currently dominate have been shaped by the movies, and filmmakers often create candidly wrong images for the sake of a nice picture. Fearless and brave gladiators and who they were is today's topic of this episode. You're watching Flip Side of History. Welcome to the channel. For an example, there is a widespread perception that only slaves, prisoners of war, pretty much the same slaves, and convicted criminals were gladiators. Sure, absolutely unprepared gladiators also entered the rings, who nearly always died in the first match. Still, the Romans were not as expendable as we are led to believe. The wealthy Romans who had their own gladiators, as well as the trainers of gladiatorial schools, who were called Lanists, were by no means eager to slaughter their wards on a massive scale, even to please the public. As somewhat cynical as it might sound, gladiators were quite a profitable investment, and well-trained gladiators were an outstanding value investment, so the death in combat of someone in whom a lot of money had been invested was not pleasant to the owners of gladiators whatsoever. Thus, most of the time in the rings, the opponents only just tried to harm each other, but not to kill each other. Moreover, gladiatorial fights themselves did not take place as often as the directors tried to show us. According to some estimations, out of 8 fights of professional gladiators, the death was the sole result in just one match. This indicates once again that the Romans were very careful with their investments. Also, the gladiators themselves organized something like a professional league, which undertook the funeral of their fallen acquaintances, helped the families of the deceased, and so on. We should also stress here that it was not only slaves who were gladiators. The slave, speaking of freedom, was usually free after 3 to 5 years of fighting. There were also free citizens who, by taking the gladiator's sacred oath, refused all the rights, privileges, and freedoms of a Roman citizen. And there were indeed good reasons for this. First, during the duel, the excited crowd would throw coins at the winner, and some high-ranking Roman patricians could also give the winner a purse of gold coins, which not only allowed a slave, for example, to ransom his freedom, but also to seriously improve his financial situation afterwards. All of the money that the gladiator received from the viewers in the ring belonged entirely to the winner of the event. In addition, the winner of the match was sure to receive a large cash prize and a victory wreath. And the best gladiators were awarded with the so-called reward for seniority, a wooden blade. It was awarded not for a single fight, but for repeated victories in appreciation of a gladiator's career in the arena being regarded as remarkable. This gave the right to either leave the arena permanently or to fight for, so to speak, sporting interest without threat to one's life. If a wounded gladiator in the arena was given life, he received perhaps the best medical care for that time in Roman Empire. Again, this shows that gladiators, contrary to popular belief, were not mere expendable material but a durable and prized investment. But above all else, gladiators had both a special advantage and a damnation. It is a misconception to think that gladiators devoted their time away from fights in the arena strictly to training. No doubt, most of their time was devoted to training because their careers and lives depended on the skill level of each gladiator. But there were also other rather specific hobbies and activities which today can both amaze and, strange as it may seem, bring understanding. For an instance, Commodus, son of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, acted as a brave gladiator himself, and in his spare time away from battles he was not to be bored. On his orders, a micro-arena was built in the palace, where the emperor, in modern terms, cosplayed a gladiator. In addition, Commodus adored the bacchanalia and often disguised himself as a woman to have sexual encounters with male slaves. By the way, Marcus Aurelius himself turned out to be a participant in a rather gruesome gladiatorial spectacle. His wife, Faustina the Younger, said that she was in love with the gladiator. The dismayed emperor turned to the diviners for help. They proposed a solution. Faustina was to make love to the object of her obsession, in the process of which the unhappy man was murdered. The emperor's wife covered herself in her admirer's blood and jumped into the arms of her legitimate husband. This, according to visionaries, gave Marcus Aurelius strength and firmness. One interesting thing here is that Faustina the Younger fell in love, by and large, with a slave. In spite of the seeming bizarreness, there was nothing out of the commonplace here. The fact is that the gladiatorial fights themselves implicitly carried a subtle erotic connotation, where half-naked men killed each other while playing with their muscles. This brought a lot of Roman women into a state of ecstasy, so rich ladies even took special slaves with them to the fights, whose task was to satisfy their mistresses' desires that flared up right on the tribunes. The very gladiators themselves were at the height of popularity at the level of famous pop singers nowadays. They were adored by ordinary citizens. Noble young women had fantasies about them. During the archaeological excavations at Pompeii, many frescoes were discovered on the walls, depicting scenes of intimacy between women and gladiators, and the researchers are confident that the images are fantasies of Roman women. This is where one of the main outside activities of gladiators originated. Keeping in mind that even free citizens essentially gave up many rights and freedoms, a gladiator could often be simply, raped. And this was actually the common pattern. Certain women who had enough gold would simply buy their favorite gladiator to satisfy their most concealed desires. And the more successful the gladiator was, the higher the charge and demand was. Here it should be noted that free warriors often did not do it of their own free will, though sometimes they had the right to choose. But slaves, as it was said before, had no choice, so the matron who paid more became the lucky owner of a muscular and famous in Roman Empire trophy. In their nature, outside the arena, gladiators were on the same level as the workers of the love industry, and this applied to everybody, including former free citizens who were engaged in fights. The second employment for gladiators was as bodyguards. Again, only rich enough Roman women bought the most famous fighters. As for the direct protection of the body, there was no such a thing. Again, it all came down to the banal intimacy, which took place strictly at the will of the mistress. But for the sake of justice, it should be said that the purchase of a gladiator was not a long-term one. As some of the researchers suggest, the period was basically a single night. For example, many wealthy ladies who hire bodyguards gladiators for the overnight do so with the expectation that her body will be very carefully guarded in reality. In short, gladiators were no longer even masters of their own bodies, which became merely instruments for satisfying the fleshly desires of their clientele. And clearly, while such entertainment seemed to be pleasant for the gladiator, the object of keeping the body was not always pleasant, so there was a negative side to even that. Another, possibly not so much a pastime as an action, often a typical characteristic of gladiators, was the willing or unwilling ability to infatuate a beautiful Roman woman. And there were so many cases that even Commodus, the already mentioned son of supposedly Marcus Aurelius, is thought by some to be the son of a gladiator. That is, by all accounts, Faustina was in love with the warrior of the arena not for the first time, and before that lucky boy was much luckier. Not only was he not killed, but his descendant even became the son of the emperor, but he could not achieve emperorship. At a certain point, everyone was so fed up with Commodus that people just killed him. It is intriguing that the love for gladiators in most citizens of Rome was even heavily criticized. The poet Juvenal, who lived in the 1st century and beginning of the 2nd century, even mocked the wife of the Roman senator of the town of Appia, who fell in love with the gladiator. Her dear Sergius had already begun to do the shaving. His wounded arm promised a discharge, and his face had various deformities on it. A helmet scar, a huge nose fat, disgusting wit. That's what transforms these guys. That's what she preferred to her children and to her country, to her sister and to her husband. Another involuntary activity concerned the retiari, the type of gladiators. In the drawings known from school textbooks, retiari are depicted with a trident and nets. In the rating of likability for gladiators, retiari were in the last place because both their weapons and the manner of fighting yielded a pampered and effeminate look. In different words, one could say that, as such, the acting gladiators had no entertainment at all. Those who had taken the oath no longer belonged to themselves, and their free time was regulated either by the lanist or by wealthy Romans. Perhaps after the end of their careers, many gladiators did have their time off for all the hard work of living, rather an attempt to make up for the lost time. We mean, to risk your own life for several years to the roar of the crowd is still not the most pleasurable, albeit highly rewarding, experience. Thank you for watching another episode on Flip Side of History. Subscribe, leave a like, and take a look at our other episodes on the channel.